Okay, FrameSync pre-roll for Sunday night, May 1st, 2016.
Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this Sunday night, May 1st, 2016 edition of Nightcast. For our opening story tonight, we go over to Iraq, where Iraq's prime minister has ordered the arrest of Shia Muslim activists who stormed Parliament in Baghdad yesterday on Saturday. David Campanelli of the BBC has this revealing opening video report.
These protesters appear to be going nowhere soon. Thousands of people are vowing to continue their sit-in of Baghdad's Green Zone until their demands are met. Prime Minister Abadi has gone to the scene, where he's ordered the arrest and prosecution of the protesters. But security forces have yet to take action, and the situation is calm. This was the scene on Saturday. The blast barriers torn down and hundreds flooding into what's supposed to be the safest, most secure part of Baghdad. Not content with entering this fortified city within a city, they entered the parliament building, the seat of government in Iraq. There was almost a carnival atmosphere as they sat in the seats of politicians they despise. The people have come to the right place to rule themselves, said this protester. Our legitimate and only demand is to dismiss the government and replace it with an independent cabinet. The protesters eventually left the parliament and rallied nearby, but their actions are a dramatic escalation of what's been a long-running political crisis. For months, the protesters have been demanding reform of what they see as a deeply corrupt system. The man behind the protest, the powerful Muqtada al-Sadr.
I stand by the people and boycott all the politicians except those who want real reforms, waiting for the great popular uprising and the major revolution to stop the march of the corrupt.
Despite these calls for reform, MPs have so far rejected the idea of replacing the current party-affiliated cabinet. Powerful political parties that rely on control of ministries for patronage and funds oppose the move. Prime Minister Abadi says the country's political deadlock has jeopardized his country's ability to fight the so-called Islamic State. But with the standoff inside and outside the parliament, his authority to secure those changes has been put in doubt. David Campanelli, BBC News.
Well, friends, our first story tonight certainly writes a lesson in history which God the Father and Jesus Christ actually want mankind to understand. And that lesson is that man without God just cannot govern himself. And that's why they've allowed us 6,000 years of human rule to go our own way, to make our own decisions, to set our own laws over us, and eventually learn that, look, without Jesus Christ, mankind just can't cut the mustard. He'll wind up doing what Christ said when Christ said he needed to intervene when he does. In Matthew 24, verses 20-21, I think they say it better than I can paraphrase it tonight if we just read those couple of scriptures. If you want to go to it with me in your own Bible, it's chapter 24 of Matthew. Let's begin at verse 20. I've got an interesting story next, but let's take a minute before we get there. And early in the program, let's just hit the highlights of what this why this program is here for you with today's current news related to the Bible and prophecy. It's designed to help you, when you come home from work, be able to quickly see what the main pertinent stories of the day are that relate to the first four seals primarily, and other parts of the Bible where there's prophecy, so that you can do what Jesus Christ said in Luke 21:36, where he said, watch these things that are happening related to the seals that he was explaining in Luke 21, which is a parallel chapter to Matthew 24, which I'm about to read from, and also a parallel chapter to Mark 13, where all three of those gospel writers were writing with reference to Christ's explanation in plain language of what the first four, well, in fact, he was going over all of the seals from the book of Revelation in plain language in those three chapters, Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21. But in verse 36 of Luke 21, he spells out something very clearly. He holds out a carrot for us. He says, if you will watch the seals that are now active, that I'm explaining to you in plain language, and he followed by saying, if you'll pray always about them. Now, the word rendered always in the King James language, if you look it up in a good Greek English lexicon, you'll see that the word always there means with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, with all your mind. Be praying from the top of your head to the tips of your toes about these things as you see them happening related to the four seals. Now, those four seals, let me just pop them up on the screen here for a moment. Those four seals are progressive, the first one being depicted in Revelation by a white horse, religious deception, which started way back, as Paul explained back in Galatians. It was already beginning to happen with a warning that even Jesus Christ warning ahead of time, saying, many will come in my name, saying that I, Jesus, am in fact the Christ, and yet, even though they'll tell you that, they'll deceive many. And Paul, while he was still alive, the Apostle Paul was warning in Galatians that there's another Jesus being preached, and he was warning against being deceived about that other Jesus. Then Revelation speaks of the second seal, or depicts the second seal as a red horse, which Jesus Christ described in plain language as war and rumors of war and world war, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and the uniting of Europe. The third seal depicted in Revelation by a black horse, Jesus Christ described in a word, limus, meaning famine or scarcity of food. And the fourth seal, we're going to have a story about, very serious story at the end of tonight's newscast. Fourth seal being depicted in Revelation by a pale horse whose rider is named Death, and alongside whom rides Hades, the hell version of Hades, or the Hades version of hell, or in other words, the grave, which Jesus Christ described in plain language having characteristics primarily of limus, meaning disease epidemics. And we'll be talking, one of the stories tonight relates to the Zika virus that's growing in intensity now and in severity. And, well, it already has severity, it's just growing in intensity. But the characteristics Jesus Christ described about this seal were disease epidemics, pestilence, the plagues of Egypt. He also did say that between the third and fourth seal there would be seismus, increasing seismic activity, increasing both in terms of frequency and intensity. And seismus, defined in your Greek English lexicons, means more than just earthquakes. It means commotions in the air, giving the example of gale force winds of all kinds, typhoons, hurricanes, tornadoes, etc. And it then mentions commotions on the ground and gives the example of earthquakes. But commotions on the ground can also include volcanic eruptions, seismic commotions. Seismic commotions on the ground can include volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, floodings, wildfires, etc., commotions on the ground. Now, Those four seals are active. They've been active for some time, but they've only lately been growing in intensity and frequency, such that it relates to the analogy that Jesus Christ made. Come out with you as I tell you that. The analogy Jesus Christ made as he said, when the branches of a tree become tender and you see the little buds on there start to blossom and bloom, you know that summer is nigh. And he said, likewise, when you see these seals he was talking about become more and more progressive, and by progressive I mean more intense and more frequent, he said, then know that the kingdom of God is near. So he gave us an example to relate to about how knowing summer is nigh. Now, when the kingdom of God becomes near, there's still, let me put this slide back up on the screen for a moment and go to our, well, I meant to go to the one that stretches this slide out so you can see all 7 seals right here. There's 3 more seals to go after the 4 that are active at the moment. There's the 5th seal, the Great Tribulation, a 2.5-year period of the wrath of Satan. This is not the wrath of God in the 5th seal, the Great Tribulation. The wrath of God comes later in the 7th seal after a sign in the heavens, and the sun, the moon, the stars as the 6th seal. And right after that 6th seal, before the 7th seal, there's the sealing of 144,000, which will probably be the sealing of people who are in a place of protection, that is the promise that Christ gives when we come to the end of the verse 36 that I was telling you about, where in the first part of it he says, watch these first 4 seals that are active now and pray always. Then the promise, so that you may be accounted worthy to escape what's going to happen next. Now, I showed you these seals and all 7 of them because 5, 6, and 7 is what's going to happen next. The main one to be concerned about next is the 5th seal, the Great Tribulation, because not too many faithful Christians are going to live through that unless you are accounted worthy to escape it and be taken on the wings, the 2 wings of a great eagle, as Christ promises in Revelation 12, verse 14, to a place of protection. Now, with all that in mind, then the encouragement is to do the watching and the praying, and that's what this program is designed to help you watch it. Now, you got to do your own prayer. That's got to come from within you with all your heart and soul and might and mind. And if you're encouraged by that verse that we're just telling you, reminding you of here, that records the words that Jesus Christ spoke, saying as instruction, this is what I want you to do. And so no matter what happens in the world with the church that you've been attending for X amount of time, months or years or whatever, that instruction does not change. It's still there. If you're wondering, what's happening now with my church having been scattered? Well, it's proper to have some concern about that and be praying and even fasting about it and asking God, well, God, what do you want me to do while we're scattered right now? Which is a prayer that I ask in fasting often to God. He hears that a lot from yours truly, and it would be good if he was hearing that from you, because he might have something very specific for you that he wants you to do today or tomorrow. So ask him tonight, tomorrow morning, hey, God, what do you want me to do while we're scattered? Where do you want me to be? And he may give you a very specific answer, putting it into your head where it's just very clearly there. Wham! Do this or do that. But clearly, the instruction, you can ask him about this too. What about Luke 21, verse 36? His response probably will be to you, I have not removed that verse from your Bible. And That's there for all time. So if you put your heart and soul into that, you can even hold God to his promise. You can say, look, I got you here, God. I mean, you can negotiate with him. You can say, look, you promised that if I watch world events that relate to these first 4 seals that are progressive before the 5th seal gets here, you promised I could escape the 5th seal. Nothing overtly selfish about telling God you want that promise he's given you at all. And if he sees you and gives you wanting to do that, and he gives you his Spirit to help you do it with the right attitude and right heart, so that after you've watched, you really are able to get down on your knees and say, hey, these people over here that are all upset about their corrupt government, will you bring your government so that they can have peace? Because no matter what they do, they throw out this one corrupt government, they put men in there, they put another set of men in there, they're still going to have problems, because look at what happens just before Jesus Christ comes. We were starting to go to verses 20, 21, 22 of Matthew 24, but when we hit verse 20, it makes me always have to back up and explain the promise at the end of Luke 21:36, where he says, so that you can be accounted worthy to escape, and then tie it in with Revelation 12:14, where he says your escape will be via 2 wings of a great eagle. They help you understand verse 20, where Christ says, but pray that your flight be not in the winter nor on the Sabbath day. Neither on the Sabbath day. Now, what flight's he talking about? He's talking about that flight via the 2 wings of a great eagle mentioned in Revelation 12:14 that relates back to Luke 21:36, where he says, do these 2 things, pray and watch. Watch and pray always, so that you may be accounted worthy to escape. And the way you're going to escape is via the 2 wings of the eagle, Revelation 12:14. And he instructs us further in verse 20 of Matthew 24 to pray that flight via the 2 wings of a great eagle, which can either be symbolic or literal. No matter what's happened in the past, God has not locked himself down. He can send a real, actual great eagle in the same form and fashion that he prepared a great fish to swallow up Jonah. He can send a great eagle that he prepares to grab you up. Or, since the promise is to give the woman, the church, 2 wings of a great eagle, he doesn't necessarily say it's going to actually be a literal, the eagle itself. It just says he's giving the woman 2 wings of a great eagle. And so thank you, John, for reminding us how the verse is worded. That I'm speaking of a friend of mine on Facebook now who looks at things, carefully. And I'm glad there are people out there that do that. So we all are encouraged to take a deeper, stronger, harder look at what God actually is saying in his word about things and proving things, and but God hasn't locked himself down. He could send a literal eagle and still fulfill that verse, or he's left himself an option there, saying, giving the woman 2 wings of a great eagle, and he could be speaking, since the rest of the book of Revelation is speaking symbolically, he could be speaking symbolically and take the woman to safety via aircraft that has 2 wings, as if they were wings of an eagle, something that flies. And he says, pray that your flight, he's talking about a flight this time, not fleeing like they had to do on foot from Jerusalem in the past. Now he's going to fly us from all parts of the world if you are accounted worthy. And the conditions to be counted worthy are not just because you were called to a certain era in these end times. It's because you're doing what Christ's, that should be part of it too. But the conditions are that you're doing what Christ said do in Luke 21, verse 36, watching and praying always. And then where he explains in plain language what that 5th seal that you can escape is, he says, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world. Now, great tribulation, the Greek words are mega trouble. That's what they literally mean. Mega trouble, and it's rendered in the King James as great tribulation. Mega trouble, great tribulation. Trouble so great that Christ compared it to nothing like it since the beginning of the world to this time, and then adds to it, no nor ever shall be. So nothing before it and nothing after it is going to be as bad as what's coming, still ahead of us, in the fifth seal, that we've only had a little type of with, you read about in Fox's Book of Martyrs. It's going to be a time of great martyrdom of God's saints, because those left behind, not accounted worthy to escape, will be required by the beast to work on the Sabbath and to bow down and worship the image of the beast. And if you refuse to do either one of those, you get martyred by the beast, with the help of being pronounced anathema to the church, to the Holy Roman Catholic Church, quote-unquote holy, by the false prophet, the then Pope, whether it's this present one or another one, to come back on the scene or into the scene. But you can be accounted worthy to escape it. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no nor ever shall be. And, verse 22, except those days be shortened. Christ goes on to say, and this relates to the story that we were just playing, about the poor people over there suffering a corrupt government, and they want to replace it with men who they're going to find out it's lessons of history. Anytime you put men in office, you've got people eating off of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They decide for themselves what's right and wrong, and other people say, no, they don't like that, the way you decided what's right and wrong for them. So they call you corrupt and want to throw you out. And in some cases, it really is a great corruption, because men, without God's Spirit, men really don't know how to govern other men. The end result will be this. This is where I wanted to go. Verse 22 of Matthew 24. And except those days be shortened. He's talking about the time during the Great Tribulation now that's just ahead of us, where all hell is going to break loose. And except those days of hell should be shortened, there should be no flesh saved alive. But thankfully, Christ went on and added, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be cut short or shortened by Christ's intervention just before man would have annihilated all mankind with his bombs, his nuclear bombs now that are stockpiled multiple times over. And as God's end-time apostle Herbert Armstrong said, it only takes one time of blowing up the whole world to end and annihilate all life on the planet. But at the time he spoke that, men had more than 50 times the stockpile of nuclear munitions in order to blow mankind up 50 times, and mankind and all life from off the face of the earth, to completely erase it 50 times over. Now, it's probably much more than 50 times over now, and again, it only takes one time, and that's it. But Christ promises he's going to intervene before man does that. But the point is that the effort here in Baghdad to replace the government may bring a little bit of seeming peace for a while, if they can do that. But but it won't last, because you see where everything's going, where Christ explained in Matthew 24, verses 20, 21, 22, Matthew 24, 22, unless Christ intervenes when he does and cuts it all short, man would have annihilated all life from the face of this earth. Let's turn to something a little bit lighter for a moment. In the news from today, the Queen of England and Prince Harry have responded to Barack and Michelle Obama's Invictus Games challenge in a video posted on the Kensington Palace Twitter account.
These are all the individuals from last year doing their thing, running 100 metres and all that sort of stuff. And the American man here was incredibly fast. Incredibly
It was quite close, isn't it?
Oh, message? Oh, from Michelle. How very amusing. So you would like to watch it together?
Yes.
Let's have a look.
Hey, Prince Harry, remember when you told us to bring it at the Invictus games?
Careful what you wish for.
Oh, really? Please.
Boom.
Don't you just love Prince Harry's response? Very good, Prince Harry, very good. Boo. You know, and friends, that relates somewhat to what I was just saying about the governments of men. And especially, sadly, I got to make another comment while we're heavy on the spiritual side of things tonight. You know, the present government of the United States is in partial fulfillment of a prophecy where God said, if you continue to disobey me, if you people of this nation of blessings that are the result of blessings I promised to Abraham and his descendants through Isaac, not Ishmael, through Isaac, down through Jacob, not Esau, through Jacob and Jacob's 12 sons, including Joseph, to whom the birthright promise, a double portion, was blessed through his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim, the modern-day descendants of the United Kingdom, and that includes Britain, that includes Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Canada, and Joseph's other son, Manasseh, the modern-day descendants of the United States. God says, if you continue, all of you, especially Joseph's descendants, if you continue to disobey me, then he promises curses, including the one in Ezekiel 6, verse 6, where he says, all of your cities will be laid waste. That'll happen at the beginning of the Great Tribulation. 1/3 of our people will die just from the war aspect, just from the missile explosions of that. 1/3. Another third will be killed as the result of those missiles creating radiation that will wipe out all the food. Even the drinking water won't be safe. People will get sick as dogs, and they'll die from a scarcity of food, from famine. Another third, and pestilence, because a lot of people will get sick from the disease epidemic that spins off from those missile devastation. So 2/3 of our people killed from the missiles, 1/3 by direct missile, by the explosion, another third from the fallout of that, from the radiation that causes famine and disease epidemics. The third who are left alive will be scooped up by the modern-day Assyrians, who God says, I used the Assyrians to punish Israel when you disobey. And many will die in captivity because Americans and Britons and Canadians and South Africans and New Zealanders and who are we leaving out there? Australians are so weak today compared to the way men were before. They'll die, and weak in the sense of work, the kind of slavery and not being able to eat. Many will die during the slavery, much faster than the Jewish population died during the Holocaust. A very few, a small number, will be left alive to live on over into the world, the kingdom of God that Jesus Christ ushers in and restores, and during a time we've referred to in the past very well under God's end-time apostle as the world tomorrow, the millennium to come, a time of utopia on this earth under Christ rule, loving rule, the Christ Jesus who died for all men in a horrible crucifixion as he paid the penalty for sin. Not that we could continue sinning, but that the death penalty would be paid for us for the sins we've done in the past if we repent, meaning turn around and go the other way. Then our past sins are forgiven if we've got the intent of not sinning again. Now, even after you do that, you may stumble and fall a few times, but as long as your will and intent is I want to overcome, and you make good effort toward that, and in prayer and fasting, God will help you, and He'll cover you with that sacrifice as long as you're not making mockery of His sacrifice by just saying, oh, I give my heart to the Lord, and whoopee, now I can just keep on sinning. Now I can sin covered by Christ's blood. Oh, no, it doesn't work that way, friends. This blood only covers you if you repent, which means turn around from your sins and go the other direction and stop sinning. Otherwise, you'll die an eternal death. This thing about burning forever in hell fire is a bunch of malarkey. Not in your Bible. That's just stuff Protestant scary ministers have trumped up to try to scare you into being members of their congregation and putting your money in their offering plates. We call a spade on this program. Some of you are not going to like that. I'm sorry, I'm not out here for a popularity contest. All right, but let's go on because we got a few more stories and I got to wrap it up for tonight. This Invictus challenge was related to the Paralympic-style games, which are close to Prince Harry's heart and first took place in 2014. Next time they're going to be hosted in the U.S. This year. Wounded servicemen and women will compete in Orlando. All right. Now, that's a thing of this world. All right, we're going to go to a story next that relates to the surge in anti-Semitic violence, which a campaign group is reporting about. There's been a surge in violence against Jewish people, according to a survey by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Andy Moore of the BBC has this report.
2 years ago, taxi drivers joined a demonstration by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism outside the Courts of Justice in London. But since then, the number of attacks on Jews and the amount of violence used has only grown. The group used police statistics for the last 2 years to compile its report. Data from some forces, including Police Scotland, wasn't available. It found that between 2014 and 2015, hate crime against Jews rose by 25.7%. Violent anti-Semitic crime increased by 50.8%. But despite the growth in those figures, the number of people charged fell by 7.2%.
All of these things make people feel very unsafe, make them think twice about their future in this country and their children's future in this country. This is something that most British people just don't want to stand for.
The Campaign Against Anti-Semitism says the promised police crackdown has not materialised. In fact, it believes the response is getting worse. It's calling for the appointment of a senior officer in each force to oversee the fight against anti-Jewish crime. It also wants better training and guidance for individual police officers. Andy Moore, BBC News.
All right, thank you, Andy Moore. A suicide car bomber, friends, has killed 2 policemen in southeastern Turkey. Sarif Isler has this report.
The moment a quiet Sunday in the southern Turkish city of Gaziantep is pierced. An explosion so powerful it breaks the windows of nearby shops. The target, the police headquarters of the city. It's now believed that the car bomb was the work of a so-called Islamic State militant. His family home has been raided and his father detained to carry out DNA tests. Police and civilians are among those injured, and the scene remains sealed off. Gaziantep is a large Turkish city on the border with Syria, and largely because of its proximity, is known to contain IS cells. Now this is the latest in a growing frequency of attacks in this NATO member and EU candidate country. Last week saw an attack in Bursa to the west. There have also been suicide attacks in the largest city, Istanbul, and even the capital, Ankara. Some of these have been linked to Kurdish militants of the PKK, some to an offshoot named Tak, and others to Islamic State. Turkey is facing several security threats from many angles. As the conflict with the PKK continues in the southeast and IS attacks become more frequent, anxiety turns into a constant in Turks' lives. Şeref İşler, BBC News.
Okay, thank you, Sherpy. Friends, the next story, I have video on it, but I'm not going to show it. I'm just going to tell you about it, just so you know what's going on and that we know and that we'll make some reference to it. I'll tell you why I'm not going to show it here in a moment. But the West Wing's C.J. Cregg makes a surprise White House briefing. This story from today says, from yesterday's news. The actress Allison Janney, who played C.J. Cregg in the Emmy Award-winning West Wing, made a surprise White House press briefing today. And friends, the reason why I'm not going to show this to you is because with all of the horrifying things like you've been seeing in the early part of tonight's news that have been going on around the world, and with what's happening in the next story with the Zika virus being announced to be much more dangerous than was previously thought, and with the White House attempting to just make humor and jokes at a time when some serious effort and thought could be given to the problems going on around the world, I don't think it's, just personally, I don't think it's a time for humor being spun forth from the White House of the United States. Just saddens me to see the way a lot of things are being ignored to which we could be doing some good. But really, it comes down to more than our government. We've got the government we've got because of our disobedience to our Creator. Otherwise, God promises blessings, national and individual and national blessings, if we obey our Creator. You may say, well, how can you say that, Stephen? Well, I'm just going to encourage you to go read the 2 blessing and cursing chapters, Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28. The first half starts out in both of those chapters saying, in essence, if you diligently hearken to the voice of the eternal, the great God, your Creator, and obey His commands, His judgments, His statutes, then He enumerates the blessings that He'll give you as an individual and your nation collectively. And then halfway through each of those 2 chapters, Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28, He then says, on the other hand, if you don't obey me, then just the opposite of all the things I've announced to you as blessings, you'll get just the opposite of those. Instead of being the head, you'll be the tail. Instead of being the lender, you'll be the borrower as a nation. Instead of 5 of you chasing 100 of your enemies and 100 of you putting 10,000 to flight, just the opposite. I'll break the pride of your power, and if you continue after these curses 7 times increased, and you just continue to ignore me, your Creator, and disobey me, then the prophecy I gave for the end time, which can only happen since August 1955, that I gave through Ezekiel in chapter 6 and verse 6, will come to pass. All of your cities will be laid waste. That'll happen. I would say some of you will wake up to see it. Some will. Maybe a couple thirds of people will wake up to see it. Half of them will be, but half of those 2/3 will die from the famine and pestilence that results thereafter. And the other half will be taken captive as slaves, and many of those die during that. The first third won't even wake up to see it. After all your cities are laid waste, they'll die in the direct hit of the explosion of them from the missiles. So some of you won't wake up to see it. Some of you will. But sadly, you'll then suffer the radiation that pollutes the food and the water, and you'll die from scarcity of food and famine. Or if you're strong enough to live through that, you'll be taken in a very weakened condition into captivity, where you will likely not be fed too much. You'll have to work all day and maybe not even be clothed, as happened to the Jewish people during the Holocaust. And you'll die, many of you, not all. There'll be a few who will be able to live on over into God's kingdom, but very few. Most will die during that captivity. That's what's coming as a result of what God says in Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28. You obey me, you get blessings and protection. You disobey me, you get cursings. Whew, and are they ever some cursings? So is this a time to be making light of things and fun of things out of the United States White House? Personally, friends, I don't think so. I think people need to be on their knees praying and fasting and asking God to help them repent. Otherwise, we're going to see some horrible things happen to this country, including some of the disease epidemics like is happening now in Brazil, where scientists say the Zika virus may be more dangerous than previously thought. Wire Davies reports from Rio.
The Zika virus and its potentially devastating consequences continues to spread. In Brazil, there have now been almost 1,200 confirmed cases of microcephaly, where babies are born with abnormally small heads. Doctors have now told the BBC that microcephaly is just the tip of the iceberg, one of several neurological conditions associated with Zika. As more is known about Zika, specialists say the risk to expectant mothers who've had the virus could be even greater than was first thought.
The expectation is that a woman who's had Zika has a 1% chance of having a baby with microcephaly. But if we consider a range of other possible neurological conditions, that figure rises to about 20%.
There's an urgency to understand more about Zika and develop a vaccine. Here they're using stem cell technology to create new cells that develop like human brains. They call them mini-brains, and they infect them with Zika. Perhaps some of the most interesting and alarming work that's being done here on these so-called mini-brains is proof of just how effective and destructive the Zika virus can be.
And what we see here is a cerebral cortex. And a cerebral cortex
Neuroscientists were shocked by what they discovered, a huge reduction in growth of the cerebral cortex, the critical outer layer of the brain.
The effect of the Zika virus was very impressive. We were all astonished by the fast effect. We saw cell death in 3 days. We saw already a massive cell death. In 6 days, the neurospheres were completely gone.
Zika infection and cases of microcephaly are spreading in southern states, including Rio de Janeiro, particularly among poorer sectors of society. We've seen no anti-Zika campaigns around here, says Fabiani, illustrating that messages about Zika control aren't getting through to everyone. The baby's father abandoned the family when he discovered little Valentina was ill, leaving the mother to bring up 4 children in the country, still learning how damaging this virus can be. Buddha Davis, BBC News, Rio.
Okay, Mr. Davies pronounces that as the Zika virus. Experts have told the BBC that Zika could be behind many other damaging neurological conditions affecting 1 in 5 pregnant women who contract it. Friends, that's it for this Sunday night edition of Nightcast. God willing and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again tomorrow night, Monday night, with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying so long and good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.